Since the war began, thousands of Palestinians have been detained by Israel. Many have simply vanished into a system that's almost completely hidden from the outside world. In this explainer, we're going to walk through the harrowing accounts from inside these detention centers, all based on the ARTE documentary, The Hell of Israeli Prisons.
Those words, they come from Shadi Abouido, a photojournalist from Gaza. And they really set the stage for what we're about to hear, an ordeal that so many released detainees say is just unimaginable.
To even begin to understand what's happening, we're going to start with the story of one man, that same photojournalist, Shadi Abouido. His testimony is a direct window into this whole system.
So, picture this. It's March 18th, 2024. Shadi is at the Al-Shifa hospital during an Israeli raid. He says that when a soldier found out he was a journalist, he was immediately singled out, stripped naked, and beaten with brass knuckles until his ribs broke. Then, he was just left outside, injured, shivering in the rain, for more than 10 hours.
And after that initial assault, it somehow got worse. Shadi and dozens of others were forced onto a truck. He described 70 people, all of them blindfolded and tied up, just piled into a vehicle that was built for maybe 20. They were stuck like that for a day and a half, he said, suffocating, with no water at all. And this was only the beginning of what he calls torture, detention, suffering.
Shadi's story is horrifying, but the really terrifying part is that it doesn't seem to be an isolated incident. It's part of a much wider system that has led to thousands of Gazians simply disappearing, at least according to their families and human rights groups.
You know, the exact number is really hard to nail down, but the reports are consistent. Thousands of Palestinians have been detained like this since the war started. They're taken from hospitals, from their homes, from the street, and their families are often given no information at all about where they are or if they're even alive.
So how is any of this legally possible? Well, it's enabled by a very specific legal tool. Israel uses the unlawful combatants law. It basically allows them to imprison any Gazan indefinitely if they're just suspected of being a threat. And they can do it with no proof, no charges, and no trial. Detainees can even be denied a lawyer for months on end.
So who are the people being held under this law? According to a major investigation by 3 media outlets that actually got access to Israeli army data, only about a quarter of these detainees are even allegedly linked to Hamas. The huge majority, 75%, are civilians. We're talking doctors, teachers, just ordinary people who were swept up in these raids.
And this brings us to the core of all these allegations. What is actually happening inside these detention centers? The testimonies that have come out paint a picture that is both consistent and deeply disturbing.
This is Dr. Abouido. He's a surgeon who was arrested at Gaza's Baptist Hospital and held for 7 months. And like Shadi, he says he can't find the words for it, calling it a hell that language just can't describe.
And look, these aren't just one-off stories. This list of abuses was presented directly to the UN Committee Against Torture. It was compiled from reports by international agencies and both Palestinian and Israeli NGOs. The UN Committee itself said the consistency across all these different sources was profoundly shocking.
To make this less abstract, let's go back to Dr. Abouido's testimony for a second. He describes an interrogator taking a toilet brush, dipping it in human excrement, and then forcing it into his mouth to brush his teeth, all while he was bound to a chair for hours. It's just an act of pure, calculated humiliation.
Another eyewitness account details an incident where a detainee was crying out, saying he was a civilian. A soldier allegedly brought in a dog and told the man, "I'll teach you to shut up. Take off your pants. The dog is in a hurry." The witness then states that the dog sodomized the detainee while others were forced to watch. Human rights groups say that sexual violence, especially rape by dogs, is a recurring allegation described as a tool of total dehumanization.
So when you have allegations that are this severe, what's been the response? This is where the story pivots, and we start to see a culture of impunity and these really deep divisions within Israeli society itself.
A rare flash of accountability, if you can even call it that, came from the Sde Teiman detention center, a place nicknamed the Israeli Guantanamo. Back in July 2024, surveillance footage was leaked showing soldiers severely abusing a Palestinian prisoner. That leak is what forced an official investigation.
The public reaction was absolutely explosive. This quote here is from a member of Prime Minister Netanyahu's own ruling coalition, speaking in parliament. He actually defended the soldiers' actions, arguing that when you're dealing with a suspected Hamas terrorist, any method, including sexual assault, is legitimate.
But that political justification stands in really stark contrast to the reality of the victim's injuries. The official medical indictment,
which was made public, lists 7 fractured ribs, a perforated lung, a torn rectum, and the need for major abdominal surgery. This reality just poured gasoline on the fire of the debate inside Israel.
And the fallout from that leak was incredibly telling. The accused soldiers, they were released while waiting for their trial and greeted as heroes by crowds of supporters, including government ministers. Meanwhile, the military prosecutor who admitted he leaked the video, he had to resign, was put under house arrest, and faced a barrage of death threats for exposing the abuse.
For those who survive this and are eventually released, the ordeal is far from over. This final section looks at what happens next, the trauma of coming back and the agony of what's been lost forever.
Let's go back to Shadi Abouido. He was eventually released and had this incredible, emotional reunion with his wife and kids, but he is haunted by what happened. He remembers a soldier telling him, "Just as I made you abandon your camera, now I will break the lens of your eyes," right before beating him in the face until his eye bled. Those psychological scars don't just go away.
And then there's the story of Nassim. While he was in prison, he secretly used a nail to embroider these small gifts for his family. He wrote, "I love you" for his wife and his children. When he was finally released, he learned that his wife and his 3 other children had all been killed in an airstrike while he was locked up. Now only his daughter Sama is left. As he says, "She is my whole life."
Nassim's devastating loss is part of a much larger tragedy. Beyond those who are known to be detained, the UN reports that over 11,000 Gazans are simply missing. Their families have no idea if they're buried under rubble, stuck in a secret prison, or dead.
The search for answers is just agonizing. Gaza's health infrastructure has been destroyed, so there are no functional labs for DNA testing. Families gather to watch projections of photos of unidentified bodies, just desperately hoping to recognize a piece of clothing or some physical feature. Most of the unidentified end up buried in mass graves, marked only by numbers.
The testimonies from the ARTE documentary describe a systematic process of dehumanization and abuse. The survivors carry an impossible weight of trauma, and thousands of families are left with no answers at all. And it all leaves us with one final, profound question. After an experience that people describe as hell, how can justice possibly exist?